Yes, hello. Well, we continue. We are going to continue with Marc and Sandra. Marc and Sandra are going to talk about a topic that is much talked about, and I humbly believe that people don't know enough about. So I hope that in the next few minutes it will be quite clear to you what all this post-quantum cryptography, quantum computing, etc., etc., etc. is all about. I think they're going to present themselves very well. I would speak well of them, so I prefer that they present themselves. Just a little thing, they are used to speak in English and sometimes they get a strange word in Spanish, forgive them, okay? It's because it's a professional default, okay? So nothing, thank you Marc, Sandra, all of this.
Okay, thank you, Alfonso. Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming in. We're going to talk a little bit about post-quantum cryptography and explain to you a little bit about the things that we work on inside our team at Sandbox. To start off, the talk is divided into 3 parts. I think it goes from longest to shortest. There's a first introduction to what post-quantum cryptography is, so that everybody has a little bit of a background knowledge of what it is that we're dealing with here. Then we are going to talk about the new cryptographic standards that are being defined and the difficulties we are going to have when migrating to these new algorithms. And then at the end, we're going to talk a little bit about what are the things that are missing besides all these standards that are already moving, okay? A mini introduction before we start. What is Sandbox? Well, Sandbox is a spin-out from Google. We publicly left Google in January of 2022, but it all started in 2016 when Jack Haidari, who is our CEO, was called by Sergey Brin, the co-founder of Google, or Alphabet, to open a new department within Alphabet to work on quantum technologies that was not already working in the quantum AI department of Google, which, as you know, is working on various topics within digital vector, quantum computing, quantum computer, etc. So Jack came into the companies in the company year, and all the work that was done within that department culminated in the company year, with the spin out to Sandbox AQ, which is the company that we work in now. The area of the company is at the intersection of quantum physics and artificial intelligence, and that's the topic at a high level, and at the moment we have 3 departments. That intersection can be very broad, it depends on how you look at it. At the moment there are 3 specific departments, one that is dedicated to doing simulation and optimization, and quantum algorithms are used with classical hardware to, for example, help find new drugs with pharmaceuticals. We have a quantum sensing team, which is using and building quantum sensors to provide medical information. It's more focused on the healthcare sector. And then there is the quantum security team, which is the team where myself, Sandra, and Alfonso and Paula work, which is a team where we really do very little quantum physics. Because what we really do is cryptography and cybersecurity. And here's Sandra.
Okay, thank you. Hi. So just to get into the subject a little bit, let's first talk about what is quantum computing, what are quantum computers, and so on. Maybe some of it sounds familiar, but I thought that almost everybody has a background. Quantum computers are computers that are based on quantum mechanics, which is a branch of physics that studies subatomic particles like electrons, photons, and so on. So in classical computers, we have transistors, and the information is represented by bits that can be 0 or 1. But in quantum computers, we have qubits that can represent 0 or 1. It is said that at the same time, and this is due to a quantum phenomenon called the superposition principle. Actually, these qubits are represented by this sphere, which is the Bloch sphere. They are represented as a position on that sphere that can be between this 0 and this 1. And as you can see here, the idea is that the qubit is represented as the set of the probability of that qubit being at 0 and the probability of it being at 1. That's when the qubit is in this superposition, and at the time when we go to look at it, which is said to do the measurement, that state will collapse to one of those two values depending on the probability. This superposition state of the qubits allows us to represent a lot of information. And to give you an example, first I wanted to ask you if anybody knows what this is here. I think we've all been pretty close today. Just in case, it's the caffeine molecule. That yes, we've had coffee today. The caffeine molecule is made up of 24 atoms. And to give us an idea to represent the information that is in these atoms and their state, we need about 10 to 48 bits. Also, to get an idea of whether that's a lot or a little bit, we can think that in the end, the estimate of the atoms that are in the Earth is estimated to be between 10 to the 49 and 10 to the 50. So the amount of bits needed to represent the information of this molecule is quite beastly. But on the other hand, if we use qubits, with only 160 we can represent the same information. This is just to give you an idea of the capacity that quantum computers give us. You have probably also heard that it is quite difficult to build quantum computers. We have been working on it for a long time. And we've got little things, but it's moving along at its own pace. And that's because the most popular systems need to be at low temperatures, close to absolute zero. And also, once you have the qubit the way you want it, with its probabilities of 0 and 1, it turns out that this state decays, it degrades very quickly. So it's very difficult to have a stable qubit. And that makes it's hard to have quantum computers at the power that we would want now. Another thing you've probably heard is that these quantum computers can be a danger to the security of our systems. And that's thanks to these two people, Peter Shor and Love Grover, who in the year of 1994 and 1996, respectively, devised algorithms that allow us, using quantum computers, to break current cryptographic systems. For example, Shor's algorithm is based on Simon's problem. I don't know if it's Simon or Simon. If anyone knows, let me know. But the idea is that the problem or the algorithm that was thought up allows us to find the period of a function, that is the time at which it repeats again, in a very efficient way with a quantum computer. Where in a classical algorithm we need the order of 2 raised to n half operations. In a quantum computer we can do it in n. That gives us what is called an exponential acceleration. Shor applied this algorithm to the world of cryptography. So, in RSA or with Diffie-Hellman, we use mathematical structures, we use finite bodies, and that structure uses or has periods, and then the ability to find these periods efficiently allows us to break the mathematical problems on which they are based. To give you an idea of this evolution, here you can see the best classical algorithm that allows us to factor large numbers, which would be the problem on which RSA is based. And we can see that if we use Shor's algorithm, in fact, it doesn't matter if we increase the key. In the end, it's still quite efficient and we can't defend against it. But that's for public key cryptography, as in RSA and Diffie-Hellman. In the case of symmetric key cryptography, like for example AES or hash algorithms, we don't have that problem because we don't use mathematical structures. But for this, we don't have to worry about it because we have another algorithm, which is Grover's algorithm. And Grover's algorithm is a search algorithm that also gives us an optimization when we use it with quantum computers. And what it allows us to do is to do brute force attacks on these algorithms much more efficiently. So we have the two families of cryptography affected. One by Shor's algorithm, which gives us exponential acceleration, and the other by Grover's algorithm, which gives us quadratic acceleration. For Shor's algorithm, we have no choice but to look for other algorithms. We cannot modify what we already have, but have to substitute. But in the case of symmetric cryptography and Grover's algorithm, we can still be secure as long as we double the key length. So another thing we wanted to tell you about quantum computers, or talk a little bit about, is when are they coming? And well, the answer is that they have already arrived, they already exist. But they exist, but they have only a few qubits. The coherence times of those qubits, or the time that they can be stable, is very short. So what we can do is still limited, but there has been progress. For example, in the year of the year, Google said that it had achieved quantum supremacy, which is an expression that I don't really like. I don't like it, but well, what they say is that they have managed to make a calculation with a quantum computer that cannot be done with a classical computer, right? And the general belief is that from the year of the year, the probability that there is a quantum computer that can break RSA of the year will be greater than 50%. And why is that believed? Well, first of all, because there are breakthroughs all the time. There are advances from more efficient materials, new ways of assembling computers and things like that. And then there is also a lot of investment in this field. And of course, a lot of investment, because in the end, if you put a lot of money and a lot of people researching things, then in the end, there can be more discoveries. Just to give you an idea, well, today we have talked a lot about money, but to continue talking about money, this is the global investment, I think, in 2022 in quantum computing. So you can see that there are many people, many countries that are investing in it. And well, here I also put a little more data on the subject. I don't know if you can read it, it's a bit blurry, but this is from a survey that was done of quantum computing experts, or experts in the field, of how much they thought there could be a quantum computer that could break RSA in 24 hours. And well, only 10% think that in the next 5 years that probability is going to be between 5 and 30. But for example, if we look here in 15 years, well, already more than half of the people think that with more than a 50% probability, there is going to be that computer will exist. And well, then also here, one of the latest advances in quantum computers is the IBM computer that could already process 433 qubits. And if we look at their roadmap, well, it turns out that that was in 2022. In the year before, I mean, they've already tripled the power in 1 year. And well, by 2024, the forecast is that you can have 4,000 qubits already. Before anyone runs out of the plane, it is already here. RSA is already going to be broken. Well, because we also have to take into account that we need to have about 20 million noisy qubits and keep them in overlay, or in the state that we want, for at least about 8 hours to be able to factor RSA of 2048, okay? And so if you can't yet, why do we care, and why are we working on post-quantum cryptography? That, well, now we'll see and such. Well, we care because there are already attacks going on now where people are stealing encrypted information so they can decrypt it when they have a quantum computer. And well, if we think that the probability that this computer will exist in about 15 years is more than 50%, well, there's data that maybe for the next 15 years is still sensitive. The next 15 years are still sensitive, right? And then also because there are some systems that must be difficult to update, right? The cryptography they use. For example, well, I hope my car will last me more than 10 years. We'll see. And then also in industrial systems, right? That it's not easy to do this kind of upgrades. So what tools do we have to protect ourselves from this? Well, we have two types, okay? Post-quantum cryptography, which, well, what I told you a little bit before, which are new algorithms, okay? New standards that are going to replace the current symmetric cryptography, okay? That they're going to be the new RSA, Diffie-Hellman, El-Gamal, and so on. For now, well, they can run on classic computers, okay? On regular computers. And for now, so we already have key exchange and digital signature candidates, okay? So we can start using them for authentication and for encryption. And then we have quantum cryptography, which is not that it comes before post-quantum cryptography, but it's based on, well, it doesn't use mathematical problems that are difficult, but what it uses is quantum hardware directly. Right? And, well, a fairly popular commercial example right now is quantum key distribution, which what you do is you set up a quantum channel through which you can pass a symmetric key, well, a secret between two users, for example. And this is now, well, it is quite popular, and it is linked to the physical layer of the network, right, to be able to pass the information and nothing. So now I wanted to explain a little bit of post-quantum cryptography. We are doing well, yes. Well, and because, well, now it is what is being worked on a lot to try to find these new substitutes, right, for RSA, Diffie-Hellman, El-Gamal, and so on, right? And we have several families of mathematical problems that can help us, or from which we can get these new algorithms, okay? We have lattice-based cryptography or lattice-based cryptography. I'm probably going to slip out there a couple of times the word lattice. A lattice or a lattice is a structure that can be represented as a kind of a matrix of points, and it allows us, well, to generate problems on this matrix that are difficult also for algorithms for quantum computers. Okay? And then the shortest vector, which is that given a basis like this, B1 and B2 describing exactly this matrix, find which are the closest points to the origin. Okay? And well, we have several promising as algorithms. Well, quantum algorithms that are based on various problems like error learning and, well, modulo and ring versions. Okay? And, well, the advantages of these algorithms are that they are fast and the keys are quite small, but the disadvantage is that, well, in the end, they are quite recent mathematical problems, okay? They have less study time. And, well, for that, for example, there are different challenges, right? That in the end, what people are trying to do is to find out whether these problems are really hard or not, okay? And for example, here there is an initiative where what they have published is a series of mathematical challenges based on lattices, and people have to try to solve them, right? It's like a contest, there's a Hall of Fame and all that. So for example, these ones here have already been solved, and these ones here haven't been solved yet, and these ones are regenerating. So, well, if anyone's curious, well, you can come in here and try to solve one of these problems. Then we have code-based cryptography, which is based on the difficulty of decoding a linear code, okay? And that has been written for a lot of decades of analysis, and it's been known for a long time, okay? We have a pretty promising candidate, which is MacLise's, and, well, the idea is to use an error-correcting code. So we take the message that we want to send, we pass it to code word, and then we introduce errors into it so that whoever has the decoding matrix will be able to resolve those errors and find the original message. But to someone else, that will be like noise, and they won't be able to figure it out. The information, is it okay? The pros are that the texts are encrypted fast, and the encryption result is small, but on the downside, the key is big. You will see that there is no good one in the sense that they all have quite a few drawbacks. But, well, it is good that we have different drawbacks for each one. Well, then there is isogeny-based cryptography, which is the difficulty of finding an isogeny, which is a mapping between two supersingular elliptic curves, which would be to find what is the equivalent of this point on this curve here, for example. This is a difficult mathematical problem as well. And, well, of advantage this is that the key size is small, the encryption is also small, but it's very slow, and the security is not quite clear. It's a very little studied problem. And then we have multivariable cryptography, which is based on the difficulty of solving systems of multivariable equations. And while here the characteristics basically are that the private keys are short, that the encryption is fast, but on the other hand, the public key is quite long. And then we have cryptography based on hashes, for which, well, it is also a very well-known, very well-studied problem, and for which we already have signature algorithms based on hashes that have been well-studied, have been studied quite a lot, like, for example, these here. In fact, we will see later in the part of standards that are already standardized. And well, the pros of this type of cryptography is that the keys are small, which is already known to be quite secure, but the signatures are slow, and the result also is the size of the signature is quite large. And well, as you have seen what I was telling you, there are several families, all have drawbacks. The idea could also be that for each use case we can take one thing or another, and well, there are more challenges. For example, also what I mentioned about reticles, that the algorithms or the mathematical problems are more recent and have been studied less recently, so maybe we can find a way to break it. Then also that you can't directly replace classical cryptography. You remove the RSA and you put a lattice there because, well, the algorithms have different properties, work differently, and also because the sizes, later we will see it, but the sizes and times are the problem of that it doesn't fit in a network packet or that it can time out. And well, also another challenge is the migration time, which Mar is also going to explain later. For example, to show you this issue of the issue that it is not so long ago, isn't it? Well, that the problems have been studied for a shorter time because the first post-quantum cryptography algorithms, the ones that are thought to be more robust, are from the 70s. But then the most recent ones we see, for example, cryptography based on lattices, is from the 96, right? And the isogenies, well, they are also super new. And in fact, well, these are the isogenies of super singular curves, a Fisherman exchange system that was invented like here. And 11 years later, it has already been broken. So you can see that the newest, well, that it takes more time. Right? And apart from that, it is based on mathematical problems, which are also from much earlier. And then what I was telling you about the sizes, right? That it is not going to be so easy to replace the classical algorithms and the post-quantum algorithms, and the difference, for example, here of sizes of private public key and ciphertext or signature, right? Everything is going to be bigger, basically. So, okay. And let's go to the second part.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the standards part. And we're in a transition moment where in a few years we're going to have to do an upgrade of the whole infrastructure to use these new kind of algorithms, and we're going to stop using RSA and elliptic curve-based algorithms. And before we move on to that, I wanted to comment very quickly, just in case there's anyone who doesn't follow the cryptography world, how the new standards in cryptography are defined. And basically both in post-quantum cryptography and cryptography in general, what is done is some competitions are defined, the rules are set, the bases, and whoever wants to send their candidate to the competition, and after several years and several filters, at the end of it all, there is only one winner, or in this case, now what is a little more fashionable is to choose a set of algorithms, each one more recommended in a more specific use case, and that's how they end up being chosen. The standards now, which are affected by Shor's attacks, for example, if we rely on the NIST standards, are for digital signatures the FIPS 186, and for key exchange algorithm, the SP 856A and 856B. And these are the documents that will have to be updated and that will contain the new algorithms soon. The whole new standardization process started when the NSA in 2015 suddenly published this message, where they said that if somebody had not yet migrated their system to elliptic curves, to stop messing around and not to go down that road and to get ready to migrate to post-quantum cryptography. Then all the alarm bells went off. There was still no standardization process that took into account post-quantum cryptography, and everything was set in motion. And what happened then is that the following year, NIST which is the US government standardization body, launched a standardization competition for post-quantum cryptography. 82 candidates were received in 2016, and after several rounds, some candidates have already been chosen as standards, and the final documents are being written, and there's still a final round that contains another set of algorithms. The candidates that have already been chosen and that are going to be part of the new standards, and that instead of talking about RSA in a few years, we will be talking about these algorithms are, on the one hand, Kyber and dilithium, which are part of the crystals framework. Then we have a digital signature algorithm called Falcon, and then another digital signature algorithm called Sphinx. These are algorithms that are already chosen and will be the new standards. The final documents are being drafted and will be ready by the end of this year, early 2024. But, as I said, the competition is still going on, it's not over. There's another set of algorithms that NIST decided that they wanted to give it even a little bit more time to see what the community did with them. There are no more signature algorithms, they're all for key exchange, and there are 4 left, basically. And what happened is that last year, precisely, and quite close together in time, 2 papers appeared that killed Psych, which is the remaining candidate based on isogenies. So now, although the round officially has 4 algorithms, in fact, there are only 3 left because 1 is dead. And in addition, last year, NIST surprised everybody, announcing a new standardization process when the first one has not yet finished, because they are not happy with the candidates they have chosen for digital signatures. Although they have already chosen 3, they are not happy at all and want more variety. So they have defined a new standardization process. It starts in June this year, and it will also take several years until we end up choosing the new standards. And the main objective is variety. NIST doesn't want the same features that dilithium, Falcon, or Sphinx gives us. They want other kinds of features and other kinds of trade-offs, which is what Sandra was talking about, because each of these algorithms have good things and bad things, and they don't like to have some things loose in there. Some of the algorithms that may sound familiar to you and that will be part of this next competition are the ones I put here, for example. There is a new proposal based on grids, Hawk, which looks very good. There is a multivariate-based algorithm called Mayo, which is also very good. There is a proposal that comes directly from our team at Sandbox in collaboration with people from Eindhoven. And then there are other algorithms based on a problem called PKP, which is also a very old problem and which in fact is also very good. Old problem. And that in fact also comes from the 70s. And that has been used now recently to build digital signatures. And it's also very good. So in summary, the timeline that is left of the standardization process right now is the one that is on this slide. We already have the first candidates now that have been defined in the year 2022. The standards will be available early next year. The 4th round follows, and at some point they will end up defining who gets picked, or maybe nobody gets picked. And then we have a whole new process starting now to define more digital signature algorithms. In addition, there's another standardization process at NIST that's already being finalized based on threshold cryptography, which encompasses all cryptography, asymmetric key cryptography, and also asymmetric cryptography. And in the case of asymmetric cryptography, obviously what NIST is interested in is that they receive threshold cryptography candidates that are resistant to attacks with quantum computers. So it's another process that is also related to post-quantum cryptography, and that will give more standards in a few years. In parallel, this was all from NIST, and now we talked a little bit about what's going on in IETF. What's happening in IETF is that, if you're a little bit familiar with how it works, this organization, there are several working groups, and in each working group, different discussions are managed. And what's happening is that there are several drafts of RFCs that are being written to start integrating post-quantum cryptography into various protocols. And it's a lot of discussions in parallel, sometimes redundant, and there's nothing that's bringing some order to all of this. These are kind of the working groups that, if you want to jump in, you'll see quite a few discussions with some papers on how to integrate post-quantum cryptography in there. And as of a few weeks ago, there is a new working group that is just focused on integrating post-quantum cryptography into protocols. And this is the working group that is led by a colleague, a person that we know very well, whose name is Sophia, and that at the next IETF meeting in Tokyo at the end of this month is going to be like the kickoff of this working group. A couple more curiosities of standardization and post-quantum cryptography. Although before, in a world map that Sandra showed, we have seen that China is the country that invests the most in quantum by far in the whole world. They are also investing a lot in quantum cryptography. At the post-quantum cryptography level, it is a bit strange because the only thing we know is that there was a standardization process that lasted only 1 year, and the requirement was that all the candidates, all the documentation had to be entirely written in Chinese. So a lot of people couldn't send anything, and they ended up getting, of the 6 candidates, most of them were people from academia who were collaborating with someone from academia at a university in China. And at the end of this year, some winners were chosen. The whole process was very fast. And the funny thing is that of these winners that were chosen, some of them broke within a week or 2 weeks. We do not know very well what they are doing with these algorithms, but it is a curious fact because it is the only thing we know about China and post-quantum cryptography. At the European level, we are not as advanced as they are in the United States, but we are doing things quite well. There are European projects that are funding research in this area. And at the level of organizations, a bit of reference at the European level, that are doing things well in post-quantum cryptography. There is the BSI in Germany and ANSI in France, where for several years now, they have been publishing documents recommending companies to start worrying and looking at this issue, and even recommending some guidelines on which algorithms they would be more interested in integrating into critical national security systems. Speaking of standards, the next issue to talk about is how we migrate to these standards. To give you an idea, for people who don't work much in the cryptography world, I have put this diagram and I want to look at just these 2 points. SHA-2, which is a hash function that was standardized in Duo 1001. Actually, it is standardized in 2001, but it wasn't until 2017 when browsers blocked the use of SHA-1. And until then, SHA-1 has been around, and we're sure to still find it in the real world. And by this, what we mean is that migration of a cryptographic algorithm needs a lot of time, and it's not a simple process. And when we are talking about national security or very critical data, as Sandra mentioned, in the case of information being stolen and stored for future decryption with a quantum computer, it depends on the sector you are in, it can be quite critical. In the United States, as I mentioned, they are doing quite well in this regard. They have started publishing for quite a few years now some papers. There are even executive orders signed by Biden that mention post-quantum cryptography already. The latest document that was released in the last quarter of last year. el gobierno de Estados Unidos, insta a todas las agencias federales de Estados Unidos a crear un inventario criptográfico de su infraestructura cada año a partir de el de el del 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 y ese es el primer paso para migrar. Because if you don't know what you have in your infrastructure, it's very difficult to know that you have to migrate to post-quantum cryptography. And so in this aspect, they are doing things well and well. We are working with them. And the truth is that they are on the right track. Also, the US National Center of Excellence within NIST has a project called the Post-Quantum Cryptography Migration Project. And it is a project where several companies are collaborating. We are Sandbox, but there is also Microsoft, there is Amazon, and other companies. And the idea is to work together in a test lab where we put all our products and we work together to end up seeing how they could be a migration or end up coming out with some recommendations for the industry in general. And there will be quite a few articles coming out of this project soon. This year, we will already start publishing some things. Next topic, talking about migration, there are two questions. Do we go directly to post-quantum cryptography, or do we go first to an intermediate step where we use what we now call hybrid cryptography? And this is it's a little bit of a long discussion because depending on which organization recommends one thing or the other. And, well, what is hybrid cryptography first? Hybrid cryptography, talking about key exchange, well, basically what we're talking about is that we do two key exchanges in parallel, a classical one with RSA and a post-quantum one with Kyber, for example. And what we do then is we combine the two secrets into one secret. And since half of the entropy of this secret comes from an algorithm that is resistant to attacks with quantum computers, well, that secret is resistant as well. This is for key exchange. For signature algorithms, how we approach hybrid cryptography, well, there are several discussions going on in parallel. It is still not very well defined how to do this with digital signatures. On the one hand, there is a discussion centered on the fact that the best thing we can do is to have a public key infrastructure in post-quantum parallel to the public key infrastructure that we already have classic and basically for a while support our applications supporting two infrastructures in parallel. On the other hand, we have composite certificates, which are certificates that would be a little bit bigger because they would contain the signatures that we already have today, but also another signature inside post-quantum nested inside. And then we have the catalyst approach, which are independent signatures with a reference between them. The catalytic approach comes from a patent that Isara, which is a Canadian company, had and has opened to the public relatively recently. So there are three discussions going on in parallel. You don't know what will end up happening. There are a lot of issues that are very complicated when it comes to deciding something in the public key infrastructure world because it's quite a complex world. And in the end, whenever I start reading what is being discussed in this topic, the meme comes to my head that we are talking about several proposals to have standards, and in the end, what we will end up with will be three different ways, and everyone will choose the one they want, and that's it. How can we build hybrid protocols, for example, for key exchange? We can do it right away, and we can do it right away by being FIPS compliant, for example. There is a NIST document that specifies that we can generate a secret by concatenating two values. One of them would come from a standardized algorithm like RSA, and the other one can come from wherever we want. And in this case, it could be Kyber, a post-quantum algorithm. And the result of this process would be considered hybrid and resistant to attacks with quantum computers. So a little bit more graphically, in the end, what we would do is what I mentioned before. On the one hand, a classical integer key exchange, we would get a shared secret. Another post-quantum key exchange, we would get a shared independent secret, and then we would combine them. And this shared secret then is what we would be using. There is quite a lot of work being done at the hybrid protocol level. There is a lot of literature, some interesting papers or theses are here. For example, this one here is a master thesis that reviews how we can make the signal protocol resistant to attacks with quantum computers. There is another paper that does the same thing with WildGuard, and then there are several papers that work around TLS, SSH, and these protocols that we are using all day long surfing the internet. And to finish this part, we've talked a lot about standards, but we already have standards. There are already official documents published that allow us to put cryptography into production and start protecting certain things. The only thing that happens here is that these algorithms that are already standardized are not suitable for all use cases. We only have two standardized algorithms, XMSS-MT and LMS. Both of them are digital signature algorithms, but they need to maintain a state. The entity or the user that is signing needs to maintain a state. And the fact of having to maintain a state means that in a distributed system such as the internet, we cannot use this type of algorithms. But it is true that in some very controlled use cases where we can control the state very well, it is quite easy to use this type of algorithms. And for example, to make software updates, there are companies that manufacture HSMs, I don't know how to say it in Spanish, HSMs that have implemented these algorithms to update the HSM firmware. And it's very good because at the end, they are the ones that control the machine that is going to generate the new firmware version, and they can control very well the status of that. And well, there are other kinds of use cases where you can use these kinds of algorithms quite well. And that's it.
Thank you. So I'm going to continue with the last part, which is, well, what we've seen that we already have. So signature algorithms, we have algorithms for key exchange that will be resistant to post-quantum. What else is there in cryptography? And well, the truth is that there are many challenges, many open research topics. So well, if you don't know what to do this weekend, if you want, you can start. But well, to start with, we need cryptographic primitives that are not just standard key exchange or signature algorithms. We need non-interactive algorithms, for example, key exchange, which is a possibility that Diffie-Hellman gives us, but that, for example, with Kyber, we don't have, okay? And then there are also a lot of types. And yes, there is now a call to find new threshold signature schemes, as I was saying. Marc, and the preference is at the end, it gives you more points if it is post-quantum. Well, yes, there are proposals, yes, there are ideas, but the ones that exist for now are much more inefficient, or the security is still to be demonstrated. So, well, there is a lot of work to do. Okay. There are blind signatures, there are aggregated signatures. Group signatures, well, a lot of types that are being used today in practice, for example, for electronic voting algorithms, for cryptocurrencies, and for a lot of scenarios for which, if we want to have those protocols or those systems and that are secure against a quantum computer, then we will have to also find those cryptographic primitives like multi-party voting, like the OPRFs, I don't know how to translate it either, or the upgradable public key encryption, which is that you can, in each encryption, well, you can change the public key to protect protect you in the case that you keep the private key with which you have encrypted something, right? Right? Well, so all these things, we still need to find those efficient post-quantum algorithms, right? So then there are also challenges where we have to improve performance, both in terms of speed of computation and space, like the example I gave you earlier, that the public keys, private keys, ciphertext, and signatures are much larger when we go to post-quantum algorithms in general. So how can we optimize all of that? Then also what Marc was saying about migrations, how can we migrate in a period of time backward compatibility with the systems that have not yet been migrated, so that there is not a day where you cut there and say, there is a day where you cut there and you say, okay, from now on everything is post-quantum, and oops, I had forgotten this bit and it falls out there, and well, there are many challenges here. We have put a few of them. But well, and also the issue, for example, of post-quantum cryptography in systems with low performances, when the data structures are larger, because it can also happen that the computation times or the computational requirements are much higher. Then finding those lightweight primitives that can be executed is another challenge, and nothing. That's all from us. So thank you for listening, and if you have any questions.
Yeah, no, I haven't touched anything. Or I approach Marc. Now, yes, hello, hello. No, do you hear me? Well, questions. We have plenty of time for questions.
Thank you very much for the talk. I really enjoyed it. And a couple of questions, maybe a little bit technical, but it's coming. What do you think? Is there anything usable left of isogenias after breaking Seek or Sidash? And I throw you the second one, which is already a concern of mine, because I don't like the one based on lattices at all. I have the feeling that it is very dirty linear algebra and that it works in high dimension because we don't understand it. So let's see your opinion about these things. Thanks.
Isogeny-based cryptography is not dead. The attack that these two papers use, yes, it is true that it breaks Cyc, but there are other constructions that are still alive. And there is, for example, a very interesting proposal based on isogenies called Seaside, pronounced Seaside, but it is written CSIDH. And this proposal is not affected by this kind of attack. And the interesting thing about Seaside is that it's non-interactive. It's a non-interactive key exchange, which for now we don't have any other proposal in the post-quantum world that allows us to do this. And this is very useful, for example, for something that almost all of us use today, which is the Signal protocol, which is used both in Signal and WhatsApp, etc., etc., etc. So this primitive is still alive. The bad thing about it is that it's very slow, we can't use it, it's not practical, and a little research is needed for it to end up being used.
Of good reticles, of the lattices, what we were saying at the end of the article, as they are relatively new mathematical problems, there is the risk that at the end we might find some attack, and that is why there is some attack, and for that reason there is a lot of effort also in cryptanalysis, which is a very important part that we have not talked about, but that is happening during the NIS contest, because at the end also, when the algorithms have been analyzed in the different rounds trying to break it, which in the end is how we get secure systems, having many people putting eyes there. but well, it can happen that yes, that they break because that has not been studied so much. But the belief is that in the end there are different types of lattices, some that use more structure than others, and perhaps those that use less structure may be more resistant, and everything remains to be seen. I do not know if you want to add something.
More questions. I slip in the middle. The interesting thing, you will see that there are many talks of all kinds during the track. The interesting thing about this discipline is that there is room for all kinds of profiles, mathematicians, engineers, hackers, privacy experts, because there is so much work to do and verify that if you want also another line of work. That's out of 100.
Hi, how are you doing? Well, first of all, congratulations on the talk. Great. I have two very quick questions. The first one is, are quantum computers being used in favor of cryptography? I mean, for example, 100% random key generation based on the probability of qubits. Other than that, are more things being done? And the second is, what is the real value of hybrid cryptography? I mean, I from the outside don't see it. I mean,
if you have to implement already the quantum algorithms, you are not gaining backward compatibility, you are not gaining anything. What is the real benefit?
No, I mean, isn't it worthwhile to go directly
part
to
is post-quantum and the symmetric part is still classical?
Okay, I'll answer the second
Because
part. You don't work for the NSA, do you?
That it is
Because
not very clear that asymmetric cryptography will
the
be
NSA
secure
is the only
when
national
those
security
quantum computers
organization
arrive,
that is
right?
recommending
And that's
going
why
directly
the
to
effort right
post-quantum
now is in the
cryptography
public key cryptography
without going
part
through a
because it is
hybrid
the one
path.
that is broken.
Here in
and
Europe,
we have to
all
look
the
for something
organizations
else.
are pulling more towards,
Well, I don't know.
first,
I like
we're going
the
to go to a hybrid
cryptography
stage
question.
for
I think
several
it was
years,
the
and then,
penultimate one.
little by little, we will migrate and use only post-quantum cryptography. The main reason, I think, is that in the end, we are human, we make a lot of mistakes, and it takes quite a long time to implement things, right? And there are many examples that have happened in the last 2 decades where, because of an implementation failure, an algorithm has broken. Not because the algorithm is insecure, but because the implementation, the person who has implemented that in software, has done it wrong. And we think it's good to give this leeway to the community to learn how to implement these things in a secure way, and that you can break these things with attacks, for example, with side channel, etc. So the hybrid approach gives you this, right? It gives you that at the moment we protect ourselves with things that we know how to implement well, like RSA or elliptic curves. And at the same time, we start protecting against quantum computers while we're still learning how to do it well. And if we don't do anything wrong, well, perfect. We will always be safe. In case someone screws up, you will always have the fallback that you are protected with another type of cryptography. That's one of the main reasons.
Very fast. Javier, put the microphone if you can over there and we'll go ahead.
Hi, good morning.
Thank you very much, Pablo.
Thank you very much for the talk. It's very interesting. In all the talks you usually hear about post-quantum cryptography or the papers that are published, almost all of them are focused on asymmetric or dual-key cryptography. However, and joining the last part of the implementation of protocols, there are many protocols like TLS that have an asymmetric first phase and a symmetric second phase. Is it because it is considered that classical asymmetric cryptography is still going to be secure at that stage? At the stage where the asymmetric part is post-quantum and the symmetric part is still classical, because you had commented at the beginning that it is not very clear that asymmetric cryptography will be secure when those quantum computers arrive, right?
Thank you very much for the question. What we have seen, I don't know if at the beginning half of the presentation, was that there were 2 people who had devised algorithms that can be executed with a quantum computer and represent a danger for today's cryptography. One was Shor and the other one is Grover. So for symmetric cryptography, as you don't use mathematical structures that can be sensitive to Shor's algorithm, we can only attack it using Grover's algorithm, which gives us a quadratic acceleration, I think it was, and it is not exponential. So the thing is that symmetric cryptography can remain secure as long as we duplicate the key. Then we maintain the same level of security against a quantum computer as we would have against a classical computer today. What we are going to talk about right now is the public key cryptography part, because it is the one that is broken and we have to look for another one. Breaks down and we have to look for something else. Yes, or...
Okay, well, choose 1, 2, or 3. Which question do I like better? I give her a radio as a gift or none, and I take it home.
I don't know, I like the hybrid cryptography question. I think it was the penultimate one.
The second? Arna was the second one, okay. Then you come by, okay. Okay, so, nothing. A big round of applause for Marc and Sandra.